Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about the new Robert Zemeckis film, Welcome to Marwen. Welcome to Marwen is based off a real life story. This man really did create this little action figure town called Marwen. But for the most part, you guys, this is a story about a man that got attacked at a bar one night. He lost most of his memory. He was recovering in a hospital for several days. And when he got out, he basically had no memory. He still knew how to do like things around the house and pay bills and work a job and all that stuff, but he really didn't have any memories of who he was married to, if he had any kids or any pets or any of that kind of stuff. So what he did is he does remember having um, a passion for like art and photography and illustration, and he also likes these little doll action figure things of World War II characters. And so what he decided to do is make this own little world in his backyard called Marwen. It's a split for both Mar for Mark, I think that was his first name, and then split for a girl named Wendy, who I think found him after he got attacked. And so he kind of named the town off of himself and that woman that helped find him when he was under the attack. And so he played this little town called Marwen, and he formed his own little memories off of it. He used the World War II figurines and dolls to kind of make new memories and kind of put things together the way he wanted to do it and basically form new memories off of it. So as the film progresses, we kind of meet the people that he uses as inspiration for these characters, whether it's the nurse that checks in on him, or a coworker at the restaurant he works at, or someone who works at the hobby store that he buys the dolls from. So basically, that's what the film's really about. It's about kind of his recovery process, his town of Marwen, how he kind of makes the stories and forms new memories, kind of puts himself in the hero's shoes now that he can do that with these stories. And it's basically about his recovery process, how he got through that attack, how he got through the courtroom process with these guys who did attack him since they went to jail for it, obviously. So this film's ultimately about recovery, self-acceptance, where to go with your life after something tragic like this happens. And so the film's ultimately about how this character got through that, went through the trauma, formed new memories with these dolls, and ultimately created a small place he called Marwen. So overall, guys, I was pretty disappointed in this film. You know, I love Robert Zemeckis. I love the Back to the Future trilogy. I love Forrest Gump. I love Contact. I love Castaway. I loved Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The man has so many huge movies he's worked on over the years, and I'm a huge fan of this director, Robert Zemeckis. And it's kind of too bad that after all these years of great movies, and you know, a couple stinkers along the way every once in a while, unfortunately, Welcome to Marwen is probably going to be a part of the stinkers. This really kind of isn't that great of a movie. There's things about it I admire. I think Robert Zemeckis gave at least some justice to this guy that this happened to. It really is pretty tragic that these guys attacked this man one night just for kind of disagreeing for what their beliefs were and stuff like that. And now he basically had to start over and form new memories and kind of make new friends off of this passion that he was doing in his backyard. I think that part was done right. Just the movie itself was just not very good. So let's go over some positives and negatives of why Welcome to Marwen ultimately was not a very good movie. So for my positives of the film, I really liked all the real world things that were happening in it, all the stuff about the healing and kind of how Marwen helped him get through this tough time, and all the things that were going on in the real world, like him not wanting to go to the courtroom, um, him, basically getting over these really addictive pills he had to take, and all this kind of. So that part was fine. I liked that part. But basically, any real world stuff that happened, I was fine with. It's just a lot of the backyard stuff with Marwen was kind of where the film kind of lost me a little bit. So all the real world related things in this movie I thought were done pretty good for the most part. Another positive I have with the film was Steve Carell and Leslie Mann's screen chemistry in this film. I thought the two of them worked very well together, but I knew that was going to work fine because they both had screen chemistry in 40-Year-Old Virgin when they both had to do that. Much shorter time in that, obviously. Leslie Mann's character was very small in that film. But so that part was fine. And like I said, in this film, when it's kind of the two of them kind of bonding and getting to know each other as neighbors, and Steve Carell kind of making a character for her in the Marwen town and stuff like that. That stuff was fine. Like I said, I think the screen chemistry between the two of them ultimately worked pretty well, though. Robert Zemeckis also does reference his own films a lot in this movie. There's a big Back to the Future reference at one point in this movie, so look for that. Once a character mentions two words, you know exactly where they're going to go with it. And one of his films that's very notable from the 80s, you can't help but think about it when you see this device that they talk about. For my negatives, though, there's a lot of them. The CGI in this film was very weak. I didn't like how a lot of these dolls and action figures in Marwen basically just look like plastic figures with real people's faces CGI'd onto those dolls. That's really what it looks like. So I thought the CGI was very weak in this film. I just thought the overall narrative and approach for this film was just very uninteresting. This man had something very tragic happen to him, and there's an interesting way to kind of show how he healed and recovered from that, I felt. And the film just didn't depict that very well. It just never chose a good direction to begin with. So as a result, very early on, we're given a narrative and an approach that's just not very interesting. The film also has tons of desaturated screen colors. There's just so many moments in the film where the screen just looks gross. There's so much color drained from like the scene. It happens a lot when he's like inside and kind of sleeping in for the night and thinking about stuff in the house while it's dark and stuff. I guess some of the outdoor stuff is fine, but there's just so many scenes in this film where the color just looks so unsaturated and drained and just gross looking. So I just thought some of the color screen choices were just not very good in this movie. Also, whenever the film tries to take a crack at humor, the humor in this film is very bad. Anytime the film tries to crack jokes or do something funny, it really doesn't work. I thought the humor in this film was very bad for the most part. I also thought Marwen, the town itself in this man's backyard, was just too small. And because it's such a small town, and when they're trying to do like these little doll stories in Marwen, because it's so small in scale, there's just not very much you can do. So anytime they try to tell a new story in Marwen, it's not interesting because it's basically the same space as all the other earlier stories and later stories. It just felt too small. I thought they needed to work with more things. The smallness of this town just didn't work. This also was a very disconnecting story. I really didn't feel connected with the characters. Yes, I felt sorry for Steve Carell, and I wanted these characters that these women of Marwen were trying to represent, like the coworker and the neighbor and the nurse and all that. But I just didn't feel very connected. I think that's what film is supposed to do. You're supposed to feel connected and invested in some way. And Welcome to Marwen just never found a way to connect me to that story. Also, this film has just tons of uninteresting characters. The nurse is the nurse. The coworker is the coworker. The neighbor is the neighbor. It's just your basic bare bone characters. They're not really unlikable. There's just not a lot of huge quirky characteristics to them to make them stand out. So like I said, as a result, the coworker is the coworker, the nurse is the nurse, and the neighbor is the neighbor. So there's just tons of things like that that just aren't very interesting and not very intriguing at all when it comes to the movie. Also, I thought there was just too many doll stories with these Marwen figures. I just thought whenever they went from a real world thing back to the Marwen stuff, I just didn't care. The doll stories I just thought weren't interesting, and in some ways they don't even really connect to some of the real world stuff that was going on in the story. So I thought the doll stories in this were just not very interesting. I also thought this film had a strong cast, but it has a very poor use of the strong cast. They have Diane Kruger in there, Leslie Mann, Eiza Gonzalez from Baby Driver, Steve Carell. Um, just like these are talented people. Why are they given such uninteresting things to do in this movie? So for me personally, I just thought this was kind of a waste of talent, of a waste of a director, and ultimately a not very good script for this movie. So overall, I'm going to give Welcome to Marwen a 6 out of 10. Really not a great movie. I definitely can't send you out to the theater to see this one. I would even say not even Redbox. As a Robert Zemeckis fan, I was pretty disappointed in this movie. So, Welcome to Marwen. I would just say skip this one.